I don't think I want to. I don't want to.
Hello viewers, it's James Kalm, your half-assed report of the guy on the bike. Coming back for our 15th year. And today, we're gonna pop into
Between the thorns and the laughter, what are you after? What's there?
Postmaster's Gallery. That's James Kalm, please, thank you. And we're gonna have a little walkthrough with this gentleman, William Powhida. Hey, William. Let's just walk in and stroll through the show. Okay, so this is Postmaster's Gallery, 54 Franklin Street. Okay. Oh, is this the person that runs the gallery? Complicities. Okay. Well, we'll take a little sweep over the installation. And while I was here for the opening, it was so packed that I decided that I would have to come back and maybe get you to give us a little explication of some of the works. We don't have to talk about everything, but tell us a little bit about the idea for the show, Complicities. Let's start looking at this one here.
This one was actually commissioned by the National Museum in Dallas for their fall quarterly. I don't know when exactly it's going to be published, but they had asked for a piece that might kind of explain how the Venice Biennale operates for their readers. And I was in the middle of working on the rest of the show, and I thought, it kind of fit right in with this idea of governance and how an institution like the Venice Biennale has changed and how it sort of works curatorially. And this was sort of done in collaboration with Patty Johnson, who had written about the Egyptian pavilion, and we had talked about Christophe Buchel's Barca Nostra piece, which had sort of generated an enormous amount of controversy. So
this was the boat that had the immigrants that sank off the coast of Italy or Greece somewhere?
Coast of Italy, sank off the coast of Italy, and it kind of raised these questions of what constitutes propaganda, and it sort of felt like another way to even think about the work that I was doing, whether or not this work is.
You mean propaganda as far as the Venice Biennial was concerned, or propaganda as the way that these were presented in the individual pavilions, or just propaganda in general?
Propaganda in general, and how artwork can sort of function as propaganda, whether it's propaganda of the state apparatus in terms of the Egyptian pavilion, or a kind of different sort of propaganda about
virtue signaling.
Yeah, a kind of virtue signaling, especially to have,
Now this is a work on paper with watercolor graphite.
Yeah.
And
it's mounted on Dibond.
Mounted on Dibond.
So potentially, can function as an object or be free.
And then is this gouache watercolor that you're using?
It's a mix of gouache and watercolor. These gouache areas, all watercolor. Yeah.
Okay. Let's keep moving on. One of the things I wanted to talk about was that I mentioned this is now the 15th year of the Kalm report. And as I remembered, I think that coming by for a studio visit about 12 years ago was maybe one of my first Kalm reports from a studio when you were out on like Metropolitan Avenue in Williamsburg.
Yeah.
Had a space called, I think it was Feed Gallery, but they also had some studio spaces there.
Yeah, I don't know.
Lisa Schroeder.
I don't. Maybe the studio was there at that point. Yeah.
I think so. We can go back and check the tapes.
It would have been 2007, 2006.
And I think we actually met. You were working at the Rail. We were both did some work at the Rail at one point.
We overlapped at the Rail, and we also showed at Dam&Stuhltrager.
That's right, Dam&Stuhltrager, also known as Goddamn Stuhltrager, but we love them. And I think that Leah is living in Berlin now, so.
Running a kind of large project space called Y.
Okay, so here we've got another piece here, Neoliberalism.
Yeah, this one is looking at the last 6 presidential administrations, including our current one, but looking at some of the kind of presidential philosophies, starting with Reagan's kind of new federalism, and then looking at specific executive orders and laws that were sort of passed during their tenure that has kind of fueled the public and private, I guess our ideas of privatization, where they've sort of come from. Doesn't necessarily, well.
Got a nice timeline here. I'm actually interested in your use of text. You know, we both use text in our works. Is this all freehand graphite? Is that what you're doing? Or?
Yeah.
Wow, that's very, very precise.
Yeah, a lot of this is laid out sort of in Illustrator to get all the
I was going to
alignments.
I was going to ask you about that. So how much of this do you actually plan out before you execute the final piece?
With these, to get all the sizes for the charts and the graph, and get the like say the stock market growth graph, this is all done sort
Right.
of on the computer and then drawn by hand onto the support. So but then the decisions of like where all of the text is going to go and how it's going to fit, this is sort of all done on the work, so the computer is sort of like the sketchbook stage for a lot of this.
And then how about the research? I imagine this involves a lot of research, editing, deciding what's going to be put in your sidebars and what's not.
The federal government
Let's
does
keep
this
moving
sort of
down this way.
great job of storing all the executive orders for every president, so a lot of...
Okay, so tell us about the smaller pieces that are mostly watercolor.
They're all watercolor, and they're almost all film stills from horror films, sci-fi, movies. There's a few exceptions, but as I was working on this body of work, I was doing some kind of Instagram memes that...
Yes, the meme world.
Yeah, the kind of meme world. These were also sort of poking fun at other art world memes, like, say, Jerry Gagosian, or Brain in the Front Seat, but kind of thinking about what they were doing, and then also just really needing a break from the kind of micro painting that's happening in some of these other ones. And, I thought the show might need some levity in a way, from the kind of density of information in these, which are...
Well, you had mentioned propaganda, and that was one of the things that I was thinking about. In many ways, you could consider this propaganda in a certain way, and but like you said, it's got to be very tedious when you have an idea like this and you start doing the research, compiling the research, building up your files, and then doing your graphic representations. Okay, this is the Koch Industries, the Koch family. Some great Americans here. Georgia Pacific, paper in mine. Used to buy a lot of lumber from Georgia Pacific. And yes, our Met. And this piece is, what, probably about 42 by 60, something like that? 3.5 by 5 feet, something like that?
Yeah, it's close to that. I don't have the exact dimensions in front of me.
Go over and look at this one, another
This is like
family study, the family tree.
Yes. And obviously the kind of common thread with these is how the families are using their wealth, to kind of put down, in this case, almost literally like roots through cultural institutions.
Yeah, you were talking, I think I saw somewhere, toxic philanthropy. Yeah, well, I was going to say, if any of you out there have got some toxic money that you would like to philanthropize, you can always send it my way. I've got a little charcoal filter that'll clean out the toxic part of it. But
I think that's the role that art is supposed to play, the art washing of the toxic wealth, which in their case I think is probably the most well-known case of this.
Okay, so we know the Sacklers because the Sacklers established the Sackler Center for Feminist Art, I believe, at the Brooklyn Museum, and they've got the Judy Chicago's dinner party as one of the permanent installations. And
what's really important, or at least within this drawing, is that people associate all the Sacklers with the same source of money, but Elizabeth Sackler, who founded the Elizabeth A. Sackler Wing for Feminist Studies at the Brooklyn Museum,
right.
Her father sold his shares in the company that eventually produced OxyContin in '87 before the drug was produced. So she's sort of made the claim that her money has not come from that source, and she represents that one branch of the tree, the three brothers. And so most of the sort of more problematic money from Morton and Raymond flow through their foundations into the Victoria and Albert Museum, DIA, the Guggenheim. And so trying to make clear, at least in this family tree, where I would say the sort of more toxic philanthropy came from.
Well, I think it was Balzac, not Balzac, but Balzac said something to the effect that if you look behind any great fortune, you will find a great crime. So if you're dealing with, I'm not going to say everybody, but a lot of these wealthy people, wealthy families, if you go back, there's always going to be some kind of maybe questionable aspect to the collecting the fortune, making the money.
Well, it does seem to be one of the differences of our day right now is that people are actually kind of following those trails and trying to make some of the distinctions between, even in this case, within the family, within the name.
Right.
There are people that are more or less complicit with the problems. And that, there's a lot of kind of focus on that, I think, right now with where that money's coming from, and, not necessarily all of it is as terrible as some.
Okay, well, here's Mom. I got into memes. Looking like you just had a hard night out there with the meme world. So let me ask you a question. I'm not going to go to the big piece now, but some of these, say, 3.5 by 4 or 5 foot pieces like this, how long would you spend working on this, just physically grinding away?
I mean, generally these all took at least a month, some combination of research and doing the painting and the drawing.
Do you have people that you work with? I know that you have some collaborators. Jade Townsend collaborated with you for a long time. I know that Jen Dalton has collaborated with you. Do you have people that you work with that kind of maybe collect some of this stuff? Or do you do this all by yourself, sitting there in front of a computer, surfing Google for hours?
Yeah, all of the research started with me. Over the summer, though, I had an intern, not an intern, a mentee from Michael Mandelberg's New York Arts
mentee?
New York Arts Practicum program, Miranda Taylor, who helped compile a lot of the research and organize sort of raw data that I had put together. So she certainly put in some work in terms of getting figures, especially for the Sackler and Koch brothers piece. So we had to sift through a lot of, thousands of donations to universities and institutions. But this first one, this was actually the sort of template for the rest of them.
This one?
Yeah,
okay.
This one I started. It's the first one I did December of last year.
Marine Corps. Okay. You know, the other thing I was going to say, just as a technical compliment, is that some of the architectural renderings that you're doing are really beautiful. And I mean, you could, if the art career goes down the tubes, you could probably get yourself a job working for a nice architecture firm doing, you know, some ideas for their upcoming things.
I think they must do all of it on the computer now.
I think going back to doing it by hand will be a nice fashionable thing. Safari Land. Now, also, I went and saw your show at the Aldrich Museum, was that it?
Yeah.
And I was looking at the mediums and stuff like that, and at some point I think I saw something that you were using some kind of transfers?
Yeah, for
You
that
want to
show,
talk to that?
was all graphite transfer on top of printed text for the Aldrich show, because they were huge wall texts.
Right, on sheetrock.
Yeah.
Okay. So do any of these pieces that you have here on this current exhibition have transfers in them at all?
I use some light graphite transfer to block in some of the text, especially where if I'm trying to get like very precise, justification. But then everything is painted and drawn. So
Okay.
that is a literal transfer.
Yeah, I'm looking at that and I'm thinking that does look like a photograph or some kind of a transfer.
Absolutely.
Andy Warhol from A to B and back again. So Andy was sucked in by the toxic philanthropy people.
Warren Kanders, who's the board member who resigned. from
Right,
Whitney
Warren
resigned.
Kanders, they had protests going on there for months. And, well, personally, I would always rather be tear gassed by American tear gas than Chinese tear gas, but that's just my personal preference, I guess. Okay, and these pieces are what? Is that about 18 inches square, something like that?
15 by 15.
15 by 15?
He's gonna
35
follow-
Hudson Yards. I enjoy the damage of so much of the plans. Okay, actually, these are kind of like ancillary panels to this piece, which is, I guess, the major piece in the show. What's the title of this? Hudson Yards, or do you have a
It is
title?
Hudson Yards. I'm not sure if there's another addendum to it, but I think it might be Hudson Yards Phase 1, since this is just the first phase of the development.
Oh my
of
God.
The rezoning.
And this one has got to be something like 5 by 6 feet, something like that? 5.5 by 6?
76 by
76, 6.5 by something, okay. Now, because you're working in watercolors, I was wondering, do you lay these flat or do you paint on them while they're vertical?
Both. I mean, the landscape, the cityscapes obviously is done vertically, but then some of the text in these bottom areas, it's much easier just to lay it and be able to get down and draw it flat on a table. So it's moving it back and forth, not the easiest thing to do.
I mean, do you have like sophisticated drafting tools like the sliding straight edge and all that stuff to keep everything lined up? Or
Transparent ruler and
number 2
make out
yellow pencil?
all of the
1
areas
foot
where
wooden
I'm
ruler.
dropping my guidelines in and sort of blocking things in colored pencil and then going over in ink. What kind of footprint of this thing?
Well, I don't know if the viewers are aware, but this is a huge development they've been working on over there for about, 2.5 years. And
Just the construction, but
Yeah.
the process began under Bloomberg. So.
this was where all the old subway train cars used to be stored at. They had huge kind of open fields near the Hudson River, and it was actually a kind of a nice, beautiful place to walk by and hang
Built a
out.
platform right over those rail yards and
Yep.
situated most of the construction.
And this thing here is part of their art aspect of that. What do they call that thing? Is that part of the shed? Is the shed there
The
somewhere?
shed's over here. It's sort of hiding behind this building. It's attached to 15 Hudson Yards, and the vessel is
The
still
vessel.
it's a temporary name. It will get some other name at some point, but I think they're not going to let the public vote on it. Because I think the public's name for it.
The Sackler, Koch, and what's his name's Center for Art? Yeah. See, beautiful rendering here.
Tedious.
Yes, that's what I was saying, though. I admire your technical prowess here with the watercolor. I was looking at one of the drawings that was on the website here at Postmaster, and I think the title of the piece was something like "How to Be an Artist" or something like that. And at one point there was some little line that said, "One of the problems is that people have failed to take a Marxist view or consider a Marxist view of the art world." Do you want to explain that a little bit? Do you think this is kind of a Marxist critique of the art world?
I'm not sure. Was that an older drawing?
I think so, something like that.
Well,
It was one of your text pieces. It looks like a notebook paper with...
yeah, that one's probably in the back. But, I think this shares an aspect of Marxist criticism of kind of capital and following the money. And
kind of critical theory, Frankfurt School, that kind of stuff?
I would say this is just more about the nuts and bolts of the actual flow of capital.
So in a certain way, you're just sort of taking the statements and letting people make the decisions on their own. You're taking what is evident there and just sort of putting it out there and letting people...
And that's where it started for me. It was more of a question of like, how did the kind of supply chains work between industry, investment, and these arts institutions? Because we know that, as you said before, there is a sort of lot of bad money out there, but that company Textron in that first drawing is a top 100 federal contractor. So we're paying, our tax money is going to that company. So the kind of levels of complicity sort of get us all, capture us all.
That's right. That's right.
So this isn't necessarily propaganda in the sense that I'm trying to editorialize about all of these people, but just get it sort of out.
Present the facts.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting because I remember one of our previous interviews from a show you had maybe 10 or 12 years ago. I asked you a question about institutional critique and what it meant. And, well, obviously you've had a chance to refine your ideas and build on the ideas. And this is kind of one of the great things about being able to follow your career for, 15 or some odd years. I've had a chance to sort of see how these things have developed and have ended up manifesting themselves in the artwork. Okay, well, thanks for giving us a chance to go through and get a look at the show, hear you talk about some of this stuff. Anything else you would like to say?
Not a whole lot. It's just nice to see it all up in the space outside of my...
Let me ask you, we talked a little bit about this, but you're saying that you haven't received the kind of maybe positive critical response. I mean, if you feel like you've stepped on some toes that might reverberate through the art world and not the best way for someone's career?
No, I mean, the critical response has actually been quite fantastic.
Okay, good.
Let's say the commercial response of selling any of this work has certainly not received the same attention from, say, collectors. A lot of the responses from collectors has been the work is very challenging. So,
yes.
And I think it's sort of...
But we like challenging work, right? I mean, who wants easy work? Although I would have to say that if all you want is some wall decor, something you're going to hang over the sofa, you might not want to have something like this there because people, and this is one of the things I noticed at the opening, is that people come up and they spend 10, 15, 20 minutes looking at the piece because they start to read, and once that happens, you're in trouble, right?
Yeah.
Okay, William Powhida, thank you. What was the name of the show again?
Complicities.
Complicities. Okay, well, the thoughts, ideas, and opinions expressed here by William Powhida are not necessarily those of James Kalm or the Kalm Report, or the James Kalm Rough Cuts Report. As I said, if you've got some toxic money to donate, you could always send it my way. And you can leave your thoughts, ideas, comments, criticisms, and reviews below. You can like this, link it up to all your social media websites. And all we ask you to do is say, thank you, Kate. was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was good.